Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. I'm not sure if you've seen the news yet today, but I want to verify something that is true. I am going to leave this program later this year, but I am not leaving Fox, and I will explain at the end of the program. There is time for that, but tonight and tomorrow I want to ask you to DVR this program. There is much more important news than what's the big fat chunky guy on TV going to do in his future. This show has always been about our country's future. That's why you and I meet here every day at 5 o'clock. For several years, I talked about the perfect storm. And I have been saying for all those years to look for certain things to happen. I have, in my research, in my reading of crazy evil books like this one, The Coming Insurrection, I could pinpoint the signs and look, because I take these people at their words, I can see the road signs. They're happening. And they are stories that, if taken by themselves, aren't the most incredibly earth-shattering news, and things that maybe have even happened before. But when you put them into context of everything going on around it, then it can be the Archduke Ferdinand moment. It's why when I said about Tunisia, January 31st, when I saw Tunisia fall, I said, I think this is the Archduke Ferdinand moment. A moment that goes largely unnoticed, but ends up triggering something huge. Archduke Ferdinand, the guy who was shot that ended up being World War I. There are a lot of things going on that have happened before. Energy prices going up, food inflation, spontaneous riots, troubles with unions, violence, political unrest. All of these things have happened before, and all of these things have been happening for a while. But now they're starting to snowball, cascade. I'll explain in a minute. This morning I got up and I was reading through. I have a bunch of amazing, we call them virtual researchers. They're all around the country. Most of them are college students. And they finish their college work, and then they work looking up things for me and trying to follow stories that I just can't follow because I'm not available 24 hours a day. Last night I went to bed and I started reading what the virtual researchers gave to me to read last night. I saw something that I think is a signal of something very, very ugly. And a few pieces are beginning to come together. These are all isolated stories here. These are all stories that this was a shooting of a son of a poet in Mexico that just happened. This was just a gathering of unions at the Peace Arch. This is George Soros meeting about Bretton Woods III, a story that's barely even being covered. Most people don't even know. Ivory Coast is having trouble. We have Hamas down here. We have this something spreading all across Africa. And something very important happened in France that you need to know about. Of course, the crisis in Japan and the earthquake down here. This is a global time we live in. And if you look at all of these stories just as one isolated incident, you will, of course, say, it's nuts. What are you making such a big deal out of it? But if you learn to look at the world like this, what you will see coming is going to sweep the world here, then here, and here. And it's going to get faster and faster. I told you about this book, I think it was 2 summers ago, The Coming Insurrection. I told you, what was it? I know it was in July. What year, Tiffany?
2009.
2009, almost 2 years ago. Over the next couple of days, you will understand that this book, which I told you to read because it was coming, what is described in here, maybe by September you will say, this is a history book. It is happening. We may have to rename this summer the Summer of Insurrection, or the Summer of Rage. If you brush off that possibility, that's cool. Let's turn the channel. I don't really care. But let me remind you of the normalcy bias. I talked to you about it last night. The normalcy bias is when people are faced with radical change or a traumatic event, they'll just continue on as if things are just normal. On 9/11, when the buildings were on fire, planes were on the floor below them or a couple of floors above them, and people are like, I got to turn off my computer so when I come back. When? You coming back into the building? There's a 727 in your building. You're not coming back. But they did it. They were looking for anything normal. In 2005, the bombings in the London subway, the fire was still burning. And people are walking down into the subway. The smoke is billowing out, and the subways are on fire, and people are just walking down into the subway as if the trains were still running. They weren't. It's normal. It's the normalcy bias. And that's why you have a hard time breaking through to your friends, because they don't want to think of these things. I told my daughter the other day, I said, what do you think? And she said, Dad, I try not to think about these things because I have my life and I want my life, and I get it. But you have to stop convincing yourself, or your friends do, that, oh, it can't happen. Tonight, I want you to look at the facts on the ground. Tonight, I will begin, tonight and tomorrow, to tie things together, and things that are happening that I believe are signs of things to come. Don't go anywhere. Hello, America. I'm going to go back to that board here in just a second, but I said something on my very first program on this network, that a big problem with the news is that all you get in the news are isolated chunks. And when they do tie it together, they'll usually tie it together about politics. And what difference does politics make in your life? And most of the time, the news will just act as if one story happens and it has no effect on the others. It is so easy to dismiss stories that way, because why do I care about what the president in Iran said about Israel? What do I care? How does that affect me? Or what European countries are doing when they declare multiculturalism is a failure. Big deal, it's France. What difference does it make? The lack of news providing context and linkage to stories has gone from an irritating problem to what I believe now is a global deadly epidemic. You must start to look and tie things together. But it's strange, because the politicians and the news services themselves will tell you, if you start tying things together, well, you better have a tinfoil hat. Now, why would you do that? Especially if you can prove the things that you say. I want you to understand, however, what I'm going to show you tonight is, I'm not saying that they are coordinated. It is really, as much as the left hates it, it's the invisible hand of the market. That's what it is. It's Adam Smith. Remember when you had you remember, if you saw the new Wall Street, and what's his name? Michael Douglas gets out and he's on that huge old cell phone. I remember seeing like Mannix. He would have that cell phone, or that phone, actual phone in the car, and you'd have to call the mobile operator. Mobile operator. Then you had the big, huge phones, and then you had a littler phone, a flip phone. Then iPod, or Apple changed everything. Mine's not working right now, but I turn it off for TV. One time I want it on. They changed everything. But, now wait a minute. This one has just come out. They work the same way. It's not like the flip phone. It has the same kind of screen. It's not exactly the same. Is it coordinated? Is it a conspiracy? Are they conspiring to have all of our phones alike? No. No. The market forces recognize the trend, and somebody else moves towards it. It's the same thing. This was great until this came along. Our laptops seemed amazing until this came along. Look at that. That is the market force. That's what's moving things. It's not all coordinated. It's all not a conspiracy. It's the force of the market. Well, now you tell me this. You tell me the news channels, the TV shows, the big conventions, the force that is moving the world towards a refounding of this world, of the problems, of a resetting of our problems through the principles and ideas that our founders laid out. I don't see them anywhere. It used to happen. That's what the Statue of Liberty was. The Statue of Liberty is an example of the American Republic spreading. This was not really, the French didn't give us this as a gift and just like, oh, we felt generous. No, they were trying to teach the French the principles of the American Republic. And so they went all over trying to collect the money and trying to get people to understand the idea. The French were trying to trick their own people. Not a lot has changed. Do you see that force anywhere in the world? Is there anyone standing up and saying, no, the American ideal is the right idea. They've just screwed it up. What I see when I look at the news, when I look at anything, is the idea that the free market and capitalism and Western ideals are dead. Let me show you something. These are just, I said to my staff at 7 o'clock this morning, just write down a bunch of names of the people that are in the news that we keep talking about. Now look, does Bill Clinton agree with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad? That is a ridiculous idea. No, they don't agree. Except, I've been sitting 3 rows back and listening to Bill Clinton talk about how our life and our system is unsustainable. Well, he says kind of the same thing, except he's pushing it. He's saying it's unsustainable. He's saying it's unsustainable. They don't agree, but yet they do. Neither of them is fighting for what we had. They're fighting for something new. If you are not already, you need to start viewing the events, each individual event, in a global perspective. Because people with power and influence all over the globe, whether they like each other, agree with each other or not, they are looking to use a crisis. For what? What do all these people have in common? What is Van Jones and Francis Fox Piven and this crazy man that wants to shoot Jews from his wheelchair? What do they have in common? Certainly not the obvious. They have this in common. They want to change the world. They want an end, to some degree or another, of the Western way of life as you know it. At some degree or another, they want revolution, change, fundamental transformation. The IMF is on the list. This is the International Monetary Fund. The International Monetary Fund has just come out and said this: in designing a new macroeconomic framework for the new world, the pendulum will have to swing at least a little from the market to the state. A new world. That's what we're talking about. Change. A new world.